The day I moved into my new home was supposed to be peaceful, a fresh start, a clean chapter. A quiet piece of land just outside the strict borders of the local HOA. I had chosen that location specifically because it wasn't part of any homeowner association. No surprise inspections. No surveillance disguised as neighborhood safety. No fines for the color of my mailbox or the height of my grass. Just freedom, space, and silence. That's what I paid for. But Karen had other plans. Even before the moving truck finished backing into my driveway, I noticed her. Arms crossed, sunglasses on, lips pressed together like she was ready to blow a whistle. She stood at the end of the road, staring me down as if I had arrived with a bulldozer to demolish her precious HOA. At first, I ignored her. People stare, whatever. I kept unloading boxers, but the more I worked, the more obvious her presence became. She wasn't just watching, she was waiting for a reason to strike. It began with little things. She approached the moving crew and demanded to see our authorized HOA moving permit. The guys looked at her like she was speaking Martian. Then she started circling my property like a hawk, scanning for prey. The boundaries of the HOA ended a full 300 feet from my land, but Karen acted like her authority extended anywhere her sandals could walk. Finally, once she realized I wasn't going to acknowledge her, she made her move. She marched right up to me, introduced herself as head of the HOA Compliance Committee, and launched into a lecture about community standards, noise levels, truck restrictions, mailbox designs, and lawn expectations. I calmly told her my property wasn't part of the HOA. She didn't take that well. Karen's face froze, then twisted. All properties on this road, she insisted, must follow HOA rules. It's mandatory. I pointed to the big metal county survey marker literally sticking out of the ground beside my driveway. Not this one, I said. This is outside your jurisdiction. She stared at it like it personally insulted her. Within minutes, she stormed away, already dialing her phone. And that's when I knew I was in for trouble. 10 minutes later, I heard sirens. A police cruiser rolled up slowly. The officers stepping out with that look of, "We're here because someone wasted our time." Karen stood behind them proudly, arms crossed again, ready to watch me get dragged off for the crime of moving into my own home. She had told them I was illegally occupying HOA property, refusing to follow community laws, and possibly trespassing on my own land. The officers approached politely and asked for my papers deed, proof of ownership, the usual. I handed everything over without hesitation. They looked it over, then looked at Karen. And then came the moment I will never forget. One officer asked her, "Ma'am, why did you call us for something that's clearly not your HOA property?" Karen's mouth fell open. She tried arguing, then demanding, then threatening to report them to the county board, whatever that meant. The cops didn't care. They told her to stop harassing me and left. But Karen didn't walk away defeated. She walked away planning. That was the moment I realized this wasn't going to be a one-day nuisance. She wasn't just a nosy neighbor. She was a woman who had spent years bullying everyone in her HOA, and now she was furious she couldn't control me. Moving day was supposed to be peaceful. Instead, it became the day Karen declared war, and I knew I was going to finish it. When the cops arrived that day, Karen was beaming like she had already won. She stood proudly in front of her HOA sign as if it were a badge of honor, acting like she just summoned the entire force to handle a dangerous criminal. Me armed with nothing more than cardboard boxes and a roll of packing tape, the officers stepped out of their cruiser, giving me that tired look of people who already suspected this was going to be a waste of time. And it was obvious. They recognized her. One officer muttered under his breath, "Not her again," but loud enough that I heard. That alone told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't Karen's first time weaponizing the police to get her way. The moment the officers approached, she sprinted toward them like a star witness, pointing at me as if she had finally cornered a fugitive. "That man is illegally occupying property within the HOA boundaries," she shouted. "He refuses to comply with mandatory regulations. He's obstructing community governance. He's ignoring the laws." The officer blinked slowly. "Ma'am, what crime are you reporting?" Karen blinked back, confused that he needed clarification. "Trespassing," she snapped. "He is trespassing on HOA land and refusing to follow our rules." The officers exchanged glances. They already knew where this was going, but they humored her. One turned to me. "Sir, can we see your deed and ID? Just to clear this up." I didn't hesitate. I had all my documents ready in a folder, since the move required county paperwork anyway. I handed everything over calmly while Karen hovered behind them, whispering things like "he's lying and the HOA map says otherwise." The officer held up a hand to silence her. The moment he looked at the deed, he relaxed. His shoulders literally dropped with relief, like he was grateful this wasn't an actual legal mess. He pointed at the property line, then looked at Karen. "Ma'am, this home is not part of your HOA. It's outside the boundary by several hundred feet." Karen stared at him, as if the paper had personally betrayed her. "That can't be right," she snapped. "This entire road is under HOA control. It has been for years." The officer shook his head. "County records don't agree, ma'am, and county records have legal authority. You don't." That sentence hit her like a slap. But Karen wasn't done. She leaned forward, jabbing her finger toward my house. but he's using our road. HOA roads are for HOA members only. The second officer cleared his throat. That road is publicly registered and county maintained. Ma'am, not HOA owned. That broke her. She stumbled back a little, her confidence cracking. But the moment the officers turned to me to wrap things up, she went into meltdown mode. You can't just let him stay. He doesn't follow our guidelines. He's going to ruin property values. He has the wrong style of mailbox. The first officer finally had enough. Ma'am, unless you want to be cited for filing false reports and harassment, you need to stop calling the police for non-emergencies. Karen froze. That was the last thing she wanted, an official complaint against her, especially when she saw herself as the queen of the HOA. The officers gave me back my papers and apologized for the inconvenience. They even told me, quietly, just ignore her. She does this a lot. I nodded, but I wasn't going to ignore anything, not anymore. As the police car pulled away, Karen glared at me as if I had just personally destroyed her kingdom. But behind that rage, I saw something else. Fear. She wasn't afraid of me, she was afraid of losing control, and as she stormed back toward her HOA office hut like a dictator retreating after losing a battle, I realized something important. This wasn't over. Karen had lost the fight that day, but she had already begun plotting the next one, and she had no idea. The morning after the police left, I thought maybe, just maybe, Karen would finally accept reality, that she would realize my house wasn't part of her little kingdom and move on with her life. But that hope evaporated the moment I stepped out to get the mail and saw a thick white envelope taped to my mailbox with red letters. Urgent HOA. Notice. I laughed at first. They were really trying this. But that laugh faded when I opened the envelope. Inside was a 4-page welcome package demanding I pay a $475 HOA new resident fee, a monthly $185 maintenance charge, and a full list of regulations, lawn height limits, paint color restrictions, an inspection schedule, and even a mandatory attendance requirement for monthly community meetings. It was insane. It felt like someone trying to force a stranger into a cult. I crumpled the papers and tossed them in the trash, assuming that would be the end of it. But Karen wasn't a one-time nuisance. She was relentless. That afternoon, 3 members of the HOA board showed up at my door, clipboard warriors, armed with measuring tape, rulebooks, and superiority complexes. None of them smiled. None of them introduced themselves politely. They simply announced, "We're here to begin your compliance inspection." I told them I wasn't part of the HOA. They exchanged looks of pity, like I was a confused child. One of them said, "All properties on this road must comply." Another declared, "You're legally required to join the HOA if you live here." And the third, without permission, started walking around my yard taking pictures. That's when my patience snapped. I told them to leave immediately or I'd file a trespassing complaint. The guy with the camera paused, pretending he didn't hear me, until I pulled out my phone and started recording. Suddenly, they scrambled back to the road, muttering about non-cooperative residents. I thought they'd finally back off. I underestimated their stupidity. Over the next few days, the HOA launched a full-scale harassment campaign. They sent me violation notices even though I wasn't a member. They left warnings about my trash bins, my outdoor light fixtures, and even the color of my garage door. They claimed I owed hundreds in non-compliance penalties. They threatened legal action, saying they'd put a lien on my home, something they had absolutely no power to do. Karen, naturally, was at the center of it all. She walked past my property at least 5 times a day, pretending to inspect the area. She'd loudly talk to other HOA members about how I was a danger to the community aesthetic, how outsiders couldn't be trusted, and how she would make sure he pays. One night, she even put a bright orange sticker across my mailbox that said, "Delinquent HOA member action required." That was the final straw. I called the county office the next morning. I told them everything: the fake fines, the false threats, the harassment, the unauthorized inspections. The county clerk wasn't surprised apparently. This HOA had a history of overstepping boundaries. She assured me that legally, the HOA had zero authority over my land. None. Not a square inch. But she also told me something else, something that changed the entire game. The private road the HOA used was not actually owned by them. It was listed under an abandoned development company that went bankrupt years ago, meaning the road was legally up for public acquisition. Anyone could buy it if they filed the right paperwork. Anyone. And just like that, everything clicked. Karen had spent weeks trying to control me, trying to bully me into joining her HOA, trying to force me into her rules. But she didn't know the truth. I didn't need to join her HOA. I could own the road they depended on. In the moment that realization hit me, I smiled because for the first time since I moved in, I knew exactly how this war was going to end. The moment the county clerk told me that the road wasn't owned by the HOA, everything about Karen's behavior suddenly made sense. She acted like the road was sacred property, guarded by the HOA, controlled by their rules, protected by their imaginary authority. But the truth was, it wasn't theirs at all. It was abandoned land, unclaimed, unmanaged, legally floating in limbo. And in the world of property law, unclaimed land is an opportunity one Karen never imagined someone like me would discover. I didn't waste a second. The county clerk sent me the documents, a map of the road boundaries, the bankruptcy file from the original development company, and the procedures for acquisition. It wasn't simple, nothing involving government paperwork ever is, but it was doable. All I had to do was file a public claim for maintenance rights, request ownership through the county's unused infrastructure program, and prove I had the capacity to maintain the road. Essentially, show I could take care of it better than the non-existent developer. Karen had spent weeks trying to force me into their HOA now. I was about to become the legal owner of the road they all needed to reach their homes. I started slow, quiet, strategic. First, I hired a land surveyor. The moment he arrived, Karen sprinted out of her house like she'd been launched from a cannon. She demanded to know what he was doing. He simply pointed to the county permit pinned to his clipboard. That shut her up for about 5 minutes. As he measured the road and marked boundaries, HOA members gathered like gossiping birds. They whispered, speculated, panicked. Karen tried to interrogate him again, but he told her politely that everything was being done at the request of the future road owner. Karen's jaw dropped so hard I thought it might hit the pavement, but I didn't tell her anything, not yet. Let her stood. Next, I filed my request with the county. I included everything: photos of the deteriorating road, statements about public safety, proof of my ability to maintain it, and details about the HOA's history of overstepping their authority. The clerk told me that because no one else had claim over it, and because the HOA had never legally purchased it, my request would move fast. Within a few weeks, I got the letter. Approval pending inspection. That was good enough for me. I scheduled the inspection immediately. When the inspector arrived, Karen actually tried to block him from entering the road. She stood in front of his truck, yelling that this was private HOA property, and only she could approve entry. The inspector rolled down his window, calmly informed her she was obstructing a county official, and threatened to call the sheriff. She moved barely. The inspection went smoothly. The inspector saw the potholes, the cracks, the overgrown edges, years of neglect by an HOA that spent all its money on enforcing mailbox colors instead of infrastructure. He nodded at everything, took notes, and told me, honestly, this road needs a proper owner, and you're the only one applying. 2 weeks later, I received the final notice. Approved. Road ownership granted. I owned it. The entire stretch, the only way in and out of the HOA. When the news hit the neighborhood, panic spread like wildfire. HOA board members knocked on my door, sweating and trembling, suddenly friendly. They wanted to discuss terms. They wanted to collaborate. They wanted to ensure mutual access. I said nothing. Karen arrived last, furious, demanding, red-faced, "You can't do this. This is OUR Road." I handed her a copy of the county deed with my name on it. She stared at it as if it were a death certificate. And in a way, for her empire it was. For the first time since I moved in, I wasn't the one being bullied. I was the one in control. And Karen had no idea what I planned to do next. Owning the road changed everything, but not in the way Karen expected. She thought I was going to block her access, install a gate, or demand outrageous fees. In her mind, I had become the villain in her perfectly controlled kingdom, but I had no interest in petty revenge. What I wanted was simple: accountability. And the moment I legally took control of the road, the HOA's world began to crumble under the weight of its own arrogance. At first I didn't do anything dramatic. I didn't shut down the road. I didn't tow cars. I didn't fine anyone. Instead, I simply posted a public notice legally informing all residents that the road was now under private ownership and would be maintained accordingly. I stated clearly, access would remain open and free for all residents, but all improvements, repairs, and traffic rules would be overseen by the new owner. There was nothing threatening in the notice, no hidden traps, no aggressive wording, but to Karen, it was a declaration of war. The HOA board panicked. They called an emergency meeting, one of those dramatic gatherings where everyone arrives with files, stress, and gossip. Neighbors whispered about losing control. They whispered about Karen's failures. Some even whispered about dissolving the HOA altogether. Karen tried to maintain control, slamming her binder on the table and insisting I couldn't legally do what I had already done. But every time she tried to argue, another resident pulled out the county notice, pointing to my name printed in bold where the owner's signature should be. For the first time, Karen looked powerless. But I wasn't done yet. I hired a professional maintenance crew to repair the road. Not to spite anyone, but because it actually needed fixing. Potholes were smoothed out, cracks were sealed, drainage was improved, and the best part, I didn't charge the residents a single cent. When people saw the quality of the work compared to the HOA's years of neglect, they started asking questions. Where had their dues been going all this time? Why hadn't Karen ever approved repairs? Why did their money go to pointless rule enforcement instead of actual infrastructure? Whispers grew into voices. Voices grew into complaints. Complaints became motions. The HOA board fractured. 2 members resigned after learning Karen had falsified maps to make it look like my property along with several others were part of the HOA when they weren't. One board member confessed that Karen pressured them to sign documents without reading them. Another admitted she had been using violation fines to pay for her personal landscaping. Every secret she had hidden behind the veil of community protection. started spilling out. Meanwhile, the residents started approaching me more than her, not to complain, but to say thank you, to ask for help, to express relief that someone was finally doing things the right way. Karen hated that the most. In desperation, she tried filing a lawsuit to challenge my ownership of the road. It was dismissed in less than 10 minutes. She tried calling the county commissioner, who politely told her that her HOA had no legal standing over public infrastructure. She even tried organizing protests. 3 people showed up, and one of them left early because they had groceries melting in the car. Her power was slipping away, one argument at a time. But the final nail in the coffin came during the following month's HOA meeting. Residents, fed up with her lies, bullying, and mismanagement, voted overwhelmingly to remove her as president. Some even pushed to dissolve the HOA entirely, citing corruption and violation of homeowners' rights. Karen screamed. She threw papers. She accused everyone of betrayal, and then she stormed out. A week later, a moving truck showed up in front of her house, the same kind she once tried to inspect when I moved in. She left quietly, face red, eyes cold, refusing to look at anyone. As for the HOA, it didn't survive long without her iron fist. Without the constant harassment, without the fake fines, without Karen's obsession with control, people realized they didn't need an HOA at all. Within 3 months, it was dissolved completely. The neighborhood became peaceful, friendly, normal, and every time someone drove smoothly over the road, I restored. They remembered exactly how this whole thing started. Karen tried to control me, but in the end, I took control of everything she thought she owned, and I did it legally, calmly, and without ever becoming the villain she imagined I was.